They laughed at us. When humanity made first contact with the galactic Concord, we expected wonder. Maybe fear. But what we got was condescension, amusement thinly veiled behind protocol. They arrived not as conquerors, not as diplomats, but as spectators, arrogant species with sleek ships and glowing insignias, orbiting our planet like tourists peering into a historical museum. Our cities were scanned, our cultures indexed, our defenses ignored. Their language was sharp but dismissive. Primitive, they called us. One counselor chuckled when footage of our jet fighters was shown. Another scoffed when nuclear arsenals were displayed. To them, ballistic missiles were relics. Gunpowder? Childish. Our satellites, laughably outdated. The Council's report labeled Earth a resource tier 3 world, rich in minerals, rare isotopes, clean water, but utterly lacking in defensive value. The word harmless was used more than once. So, we were assigned a protector. The Trooks. A species bred for war, not for compassion. Their idea of guardianship was exploitation by another name. Drilling rigs tore through protected lands. Oceans were scanned for trace metals and biotic samples. Atmospheric layers were mined for data and depleted without permission. They even used our moon for target practice. When humans protested, the Trooks didn't negotiate. They laughed. And when resistance flared, even peacefully, they demonstrated power with precise orbital strikes, never wiping us out completely, just enough to remind us of our place. They turned us into a broadcast. Across the galaxy, channels aired our responses, primitive, emotional, sometimes violent, as comedy. A reality show for advanced species to feel superior. They didn't conquer Earth. They humiliated it. A civilization of 7 billion reduced to a joke on galactic evening news. But they didn't understand what that kind of humiliation does to a species like ours. We have always been underestimated, by nature, by history, by each other. Every time we're stepped on, we rise harder. Every time we're mocked, we remember. Our pain is not just personal. It becomes fuel. It becomes steel. The Council saw weakness. They missed the anger. They called our weapons outdated. But those weapons were made during our darkest hours, built not with mercy but with survival in mind. They were never clean. Never elegant. Just brutally efficient. They forgot we built weapons not to deter, but to destroy. Not to negotiate, but to end wars quickly, no matter the cost. They thought humans were behind the times. That our era of war had passed. That we were easy to handle. They didn't know that when we're backed into a corner, we don't beg. We fire back. The first spark wasn't a declaration of war. It was grief. In Alaska, when the Trooks drills bored through ancient glaciers held sacred for generations, the protests were small. Local. Human. Families stood in the snow, hands raised, signs held. No weapons. Just words. The Trooks answered with fire. A single orbital strike erased 3 towns. No warnings. No survivors. The message was clear: compliance or extinction. But something broke that day, not fear, not resolve, something deeper. A quiet shift in the eyes of those left behind. A decision made not in boardrooms or war rooms, but in basements and garages. A decision that enough was enough. The first resistance wasn't planned. A group of hunters, grandfathers, sons, neighbors, ambushed a patrol with bolt-action rifles and IEDs crafted from tractor fuel and fertilizer. They should have failed. The Trooks wore armor rated for plasma. They had drones, shields, scanners. But none of that mattered when a 76-year-old marksman shot clean through the optic port of a scout's helmet using a museum-kept sniper rifle from a war humanity had almost forgotten. That one bullet did more than kill a soldier. It shattered the illusion that humans wouldn't fight back. Word traveled fast, not through official channels, but across ham radios, encrypted mesh nets, handwritten notes slipped across borders. In Brazil, retired naval engineers stole an old nuclear sub, patching it together with homemade tech. In Ukraine, code warriors hijacked a Trooks comms relay with software written in kitchens lit by candlelight. In India, a scrapyard rocket, crude, unstable, was launched from a desert plateau. It carried no AI, no shielding, no stealth. But it struck a Trooks orbital skiff and sent it burning into the atmosphere. The Council didn't laugh at those incidents. Not openly. But their silence on the broadcasts was loud. The kind of silence that comes when amusement curdles into confusion. The problem wasn't our tech. It was theirs. So dependent on automation, on predictive models, on shields that assumed enemies would play by the same rules. But humanity doesn't play fair. Our weapons are old, yes, but not obsolete. They're built for chaos. For saturation. For absolute destruction. Kinetic. Crude. Catastrophic. And that's what they never grasped. The principle wasn't about sophistication. It was about survival. About adapting under pressure. Every human war taught us something brutal. That wars aren't won with elegance. They're won by the side that refuses to quit, even when every logical reason says they should. The Trooks wanted compliance. What they got was defiance. They believed humans would stay down, keep grieving, keep begging. Instead, we reached into the past, pulled out the weapons they thought we buried, and turned them toward the sky. They still called us primitive. But now they whispered it. They escalated. That was their answer. Not with dialogue. Not with restraint. With fire. Cities vanished in seconds. Vaporized by high orbital plasma. No warnings. No demands. Just annihilation. Earth's defense satellites, the few that still functioned, were blinded in coordinated strikes. Communications collapsed. Governments fractured. Those in charge signed surrender documents in secret bunkers, their hands shaking, their voices hollow. But they didn't speak for everyone. In truth, they never had. What the Trooks didn't understand, what the Concorde refused to see, was that humanity doesn't need orders to resist. We don't require permission to survive. The collapse of official command didn't stop the fight. It unchained it. Across scorched landscapes, resistance didn't just grow. It multiplied, scattered, embedded itself like fire in dry grass. There were no uniforms now. Just purpose. In shattered neighborhoods, welders turned car parts into armor plating. In flooded subway systems, hackers ran command nodes off battery banks and stolen routers. In jungles and deserts, field doctors stitched soldiers together with fishing line and ethanol. There were no supply chains. There was only ingenuity. A crashed Trooks gunship changed everything. The first one we captured intact. Charred, leaking fuel, half embedded in a mountain, useless to them. Priceless to us. It was dragged into an abandoned hydro dam by a convoy of farmers driving modified tractors. Over weeks, mechanics, engineers, and kids with no formal training pulled it apart. Studied it. Rebuilt it, wrong but functional. The propulsion system, once graceful and quiet, was now loud, temperamental, but it moved. That propulsion was bolted onto an old Soviet submarine that hadn't touched water in decades. What emerged from that makeshift dry dock wasn't sleek or elegant. It groaned. It leaked. Its systems were patched with duct tape and prayers. But it flew. They called it suicide. We called it a ship. It launched from the atmosphere like a wounded animal trying to escape a burning cage. The crew were volunteers, no military rank, no pay, just names. They rammed it directly into a Troops frigate in low orbit, bypassing shields by sheer kinetic force. As they passed into the frigate's hull, they fired a railgun made from repurposed tank barrels. One shot. Reactor core. Chain detonation. The human ship didn't survive. But neither did the frigate. The impact was not just physical. It was symbolic. The galaxy saw it. A species with no right to challenge the stars had done exactly that, with rusted metal, outdated blueprints, and sheer will. The Concorde still had superiority. But now they had fear. Because we had proven the unthinkable, that humans, even outgunned and outclassed, could still strike. They had always relied on precision. On predictability. Their war was clean, mathematical. Ours never was. Ours was about damage. About cost. About showing the enemy that for every inch they took, they'd pay in blood, steel, and flame. They believed we were primitive. And maybe we were. But primitive doesn't mean weak. It means we fight with what we have. And we never stop. They brought the fleet. Hundreds of ships, sleek and silver, shimmering with artificial grav fields and shield cores that pulsed like stars. The Galactic Concord didn't send diplomats this time. They sent judgment. A coalition of the enlightened Valari tacticians, troops, shock carriers, Sintel support barges, all united under a single doctrine: crush the resistance, erase the rebellion, restore order. They called it peace. But peace through silence is not peace. It's occupation. The transmission they broadcast was short, polished, cold. Surrender your weapons. Surrender your orbit. Or be extinguished. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a warning dressed in certainty. They believed their numbers were enough. That their technology would end this without effort. That humans, finally surrounded, would do what was logical. But they still didn't understand. We don't bend to logic when principle is on the line. We bend logic itself. We didn't surrender. We launched. Not from orbital platforms or starports. From ice fields, from rusted rail lines, from hidden silos buried beneath ancient farmland. Missiles made from submarine cores. Payloads guided by scavenged satellite parts. Kinetic rods dropped from high-altitude planes without even explosive tips, just sheer mass, raw gravity. We didn't have shield bypass tech. We had velocity. They tried to intercept. Too late. Their defense networks had never faced saturation fire. Their computers had never calculated trajectories that didn't follow protocol. Our weapons weren't beautiful. They were relentless. Crude rail guns buried in forested valleys tore through atmospheric entry points. Electromagnetic pulses, powered by scrapyard coils and stolen reactor cores, fried their targeting systems. Their shields held. For a time. Until we overloaded them, not with power, but persistence. Hit after hit. Shot after shot. We didn't aim for structure. We aimed for the bridge. For the life support. For the arrogance. A fleet of retrofitted vessels rose from Earth. None of them designed for war. Cargo freighters welded with armor. Shuttles lined with scavenged plating. Missile platforms built atop decommissioned oil rigs dragged into the sea and disguised as abandoned ruins. They didn't move gracefully. They didn't coordinate with galactic tactics. They rammed. They bled. They detonated at point blank. One human ship, barely holding together, locked its trajectory into a Valari cruiser and ignited its core. No escape pod. No retreat. Just a final transmission. You called us primitive. Let me show you what that means. They believed in rules. We believed in results. Because we weren't fighting for conquest. We weren't fighting to prove superiority. We were fighting to survive. And when survival is all you have, you don't aim for victory. You aim to make your enemy never want to fight you again. There was no treaty. No delegation sent to offer terms. No ceremonial surrender. The war ended not with signatures, but with silence. The Concorde's flagship, the heart of their pride, the beacon of their authority, was the last to fall. It burned through Earth's atmosphere like a dying star, pieces of it scattering across the Atlantic like broken promises. There were no survivors aboard, only wreckage and data cores warped by fire. And from the last surviving human warship still in orbit, a single transmission was broadcast, no visuals, just a voice forged in loss and defiance. You mocked our weapons. You mocked our history. You forgot that every tool we ever made was built not for pride, but for survival. You think we're behind. We think you're soft. Come again, and we'll show you just how primitive we can get. The signal echoed through the galactic relay systems. Every species heard it. Every council, every colony, every self-assured war fleet tuned in. And for the first time, no one replied. Not out of respect. Out of fear. The Concorde fractured in the weeks that followed. Not officially. No announcements. Just sudden hesitation. Borders pulled back. Patrols rerouted. Treaties quietly dissolved. The races who once laughed at Earth now avoided its system entirely. Others, those who had chafed under the Concorde's arrogance, began to approach us in whispers, seeking alliance, guidance, perhaps protection. We did not take their throne. We did not ask for leadership. We took their wreckage instead. We learned from it. Salvaged what we could. Built upon it, not to mimic their perfection, but to harden our flaws. Our new ships weren't elegant. They were layered in redundant plating, driven by engines designed to endure chaos, not avoid it. We built not a fleet of dominance, but of deterrence. Ugly. Fast. Human. We launched again, not to conquer, but to explore. Not to destroy, but to remember. Because we knew this galaxy. We knew its memory was short, its arrogance persistent. There would be another Concorde. Another fleet. Another race who mistook our scars for weakness. So we went into the dark, not to escape it, but to be ready when it returned. Because they might forget us. But we would never forget them. And the next time they come mocking Earth, there will be no warning. Only the silence before impact.